Designed by a man by the name of John Deckrow, who designed them, and then the fellows worked all night in freezing weather. And I think probably the most spectacular one was the Remember Pearl Harbor one, which was absolutely huge. People loved to have their pictures taken up on the ice thrones.
While toboggan slides and alpine skiing were gaining in popularity across Michigan's Lower Peninsula during the 1930s, ski jumping was still the king of sports in the Upper Peninsula.
I probably was 3 or 4 years old when I started jumping, and we were kind of lucky because where we lived, we had a mine pit in the backyard there. And there was a ski hill there where I probably first started jumping on it. We were able to jump maybe 30 to 50 feet on it. So even when I started to school, I'd probably have a few jumps before I'd go to school in the morning. We used to take our skis with us to school, and we had a jump in the schoolyard where we jumped there also about 40 feet or so. So recess time, we'd go out and we'd jump.
I lived in a Cleveland location. We had some of the best ski jumpers in all of Ishpeming, and it was fun to compete with the other kids in the other areas. And each location had built ski jumps, all neighborhood ski jumps in backyard. So we'd go try their hills, and they'd come try ours, and every once in a while we'd have tournaments and to see who was the best, and that was the fun of the game.
We always had great competitions among each other, among ski clubs. Back then, you know, it was nothing to have between Iron Mountain and Ishpeming, have 100 and some jumpers participate in one ski meet.
When you draw a number, you sure didn't want to be last because you were afraid you'd be up on the tower in the dark. And I can remember sometimes it was getting so late, some of the parents were so afraid of their kids coming down in the dark, they'd flash the lights from their cars on the landing hill, so when you came down, you could at least see about where you were going to land.
The building of new ski jumps was a major event in communities. In 1939, a new jump was constructed in Iron Mountain using WPA labor. It became the world's highest artificial jump. It not only brought prestige to the community, but attracted many of the world's best jumpers to take up residence there.
If you were a ski jumper in that ski jumping community, it affected the community socially and economically, because you had some of the communities would bring in ski jumpers who they knew would build the sport in your community. And like in Iron Mountain and Kingsford, we had great skiers, and other communities wanted our skiers to participate in their meets. They would actually send checks, pay them under the table to get them down so they could bill their names and draw big crowds. And so it had a tremendous economic effect just on little communities too.
Well, ski jumping was my life. Work was a sideline. I didn't care. Nothing mattered. Not a girl, not anything, not work. One year I worked for 1 week. Hadn't worked the whole year, and I asked the mining company if I could have the next week off. Well, how come? I said, you don't have any vacation. I said, I don't care about the vacation. I said, I want to go ski jumping. We're going to Portland, Oregon to ski jump in the stadium. And they said, well, you can have the time off, but we're not going to pay you. I said, I'm not worried about the money. I just want to fly through the air on a pair of skis.
When more than one member of a single family becomes an outstanding performer in the world of sports, it's news. When no less than 6 members of a family achieve that distinction, it's history. Marquette Mining Journal.
When Jacob Beetela fashioned a pair of hickory skis for his youngest son in 1912, he changed the course of ski jumping history. The Finnish immigrant from Ishpeming watched his son Anselm win the first ski jumping contest he entered. It occurred on the nearby brass wire jump, where the young teenager beat veterans of the sport twice his age. At the age of 21, he was regarded as one of the best jumpers in the country. However, Anselm's greatest contribution to the world of skiing was teaching the sport to his 5 younger brothers and friends.
All the neighbor boys and that too, they'd bring their skis and that into our kitchen at home. That was almost like a gymnasium. The older boys would teach the younger ones how to make a good landing and that. And we'd jump off the chairs and off the tables and stuff like that. Maybe take 50, 60 jumps off the table, you know, to practice our landings and that. I was 9 years old the first time that I took a longer trip, and that was to Chicago. And then we traveled most of the night. And of course with a Model A, you didn't make very good time at that time. People in Chicago and that too, they were probably thought we were coming from Alaska or someplace with our big boots on and heavy coats and that. And here they are walking around with just their suit coats and stuff like this, you know.
By the late 1930s, the 6 Beatla brothers had achieved national fame for their jumping exploits. They were called the Flying Beatlas, and they set hill records wherever they jumped. The second son, Leonard, set a senior record of 238 feet, while the third, Walter, competed in 3 Olympics. The 5th Beatla brother was Roy, who set boys' Class B and C records and later qualified for the 1940 Olympics. Unfortunately, the Olympics were canceled due to the Second World War. The youngest son, Ralph, also set boys' records and earned a berth on the Olympic team. While each brother was a champion at different times in their career, it was the 4th son, Paul, who was considered the most outstanding jumper in the family. It was said he jumped without fear. At the age of 9, he jumped 130 feet on Suicide Hill in Ishpeming. And at the age of 12, he set a national boys' record of 185 feet. While most skiers used practice jumps as warm-ups, Paul jumped all out, often setting hill records. His jumps were so long, he would overshoot the landing area and hit the dip in the hill. This caused him to break more skis than all of his brothers combined. In 1936, he competed in 10 tournaments and won 9 of them. He would have made the 1936 Olympic team, but his age disqualified him. 3 years later, at the age of 20, he was considered America's premier jumper with 9 hill records. In February of 1939, Paul was competing in a tournament for the University of Wisconsin. He set a hill record on his first practice jump and later returned for his second jump. It was a tremendous leap. However, he hit a soft spot on the newly groomed landing, caught an edge and veered to the side where he collided with a spectator barrier. 3 weeks later, with complications brought on by pneumonia, Paul passed away.
When Paul Beatla died, it was a shock. Not just to Ishpeming, it was a shock to America. Thousands of people that came here for Paul's funeral. It was a very saddening thing. Paul was a very highly respected athlete, had hill records all over. He lived for the sport like a lot of us do.
In 1939, the year of Paul Beatla's passing, a new era in alpine skiing was sweeping the nation with the arrival of the rope tow. One of the earliest rope tows in Michigan was placed less than 100 yards from the Pine Mountain ski jump in Iron Mountain. In time, the gasoline-powered lifts would have a dramatic impact on the sport of ski jumping.
You know, years ago, we started alpine skiing, got to be quite popular, and we thought, gee, that'd be great for jumping. We'll get a lot of people out on the hill, and we'll get some jumpers from them. But what happened is they all rode the toes up and down, and the jumpers had to walk a mile to get a jump. And so it really didn't work out that way, and it kind of hurt the sport.
It was the arrival of skiers from urban areas that spurred the growth of alpine skiing. Pine Mountain's developer, Fred Pabst of the Milwaukee Brewing family, chartered special ski trains to bring people from Chicago and Milwaukee for a weekend. After their arrival, volunteers transported the visitors to nearby slopes where ski instructors introduced them to the sport.
If people were normal physical ability, then we would take them out and convince them that they could stand on these skis on snow and show them how to slide down little hills. And once they were convinced that they could accomplish that, we would show them how to make turns so that they could control their speed and go in the direction that they wanted to go. It was always a credo with us that if you could walk or dance, it wouldn't be very hard to learn how to ski.
With alpine skiing becoming more popular, attempts were made to combine different skiing competitions into a single meet. In 1940, the Central United States Ski Association sponsored a 4-event tournament at Pine Mountain. It included ski jumping, slalom, giant slalom, and cross-country races. For many of the ski jumping contestants, it would be their first downhill race. In spite of high expectations for the tournament, the 4-event competition never caught on. Ski jumping and alpine contests remained separate. During the war years, almost all of Michigan's ski areas shut down due to rationing of gas and shortages of supplies. One of the first ski areas to open after the war was Cabernet near Cadillac. It was Michigan's first major ski area, built by the Civilian Conservation Corps in 1936.
We slide along, we glide along, oh hark to the song of the skis. Come on with us, and as we shush, you'll wake into new ecstasy. We'll dance along, romance along, to songs of the gay whistling breeze. When winter is king, oh, to ski is the thing, for nature does nothing but please. She spreads her mantle of snow around, then puts the sun in the blue. She fills the air with a joyful sound, and it's all for you. We slide along, we glide along, in tune with the wind's harmony. Your cares will all go in the sun and the snow, so hark to the song of the skis.
There wasn't too much activity, and activities for people to do, whether it was the kids or the older folks. But this idea of getting out into the wide open spaces here with good physical exercise and a certain amount of thrill of going down a hill and not to falling, breaking your neck, intrigued a lot of people.
In the early days of skiing, Cabernet was the place to ski. For those people who weren't a member of the private club Otsego, Cabernet was the spot. The beautiful terrain, the rolling hills of Cabernet, the vastness of their area, the jump hill, the diversifications of the slopes made Cabernet the spot to ski.
Oh, Cabernet in the old days, you skied in this tunnel that was carved by the rope tow. If you fell down, heaven protect you, because there was no climbing up out of the ditches. We were really skiing when we went somewhere like Cabernet.
January and February, which had been absolutely dead months from an economy standpoint, became good. They were pumping about as much gas on Saturdays and Sundays in January and February as they did during the summer months. From the banking standpoint, they were shipping currency out of Cadillac during January and February because people were coming up here with that currency.
Along, we glide along, in tune with the wind's harmony. cares will all go in the sun and the snow. So hark to the ski's melody.
While Caberfet was introducing skiing to the general public, an exclusive ski club near Vanderbilt in the north-central Lower Peninsula was becoming a popular weekend destination for the rich and famous from Detroit. It was called the Vanderbilt Ski Club.
We skied through an apple orchard. This was not a place where you would call the hills being prepared. There were sticks sticking up and all that. One thing about those days in skiing, everybody had just about one pair of pants, a sweater, a shirt or two, a distinctive hat. My husband had learned to ski in the East and was on the Harvard ski team. He skied in a shirt and a tie, as many of the older men did.
Although Vanderbilt Ski Club was gaining in popularity, the hill was considered too small, and more important, it had the wrong exposure to the sun. Under the guidance of the club's founder, Detroit industrialist Don McLouth, a new site was located in Otsego County near Gaylord. Situated on the area's highest point of land, the club opened in 1939. Skiers descended into a large valley that ran into the Sturgeon River headwaters. It was renamed the Otsego Ski Club and was soon attracting new members from across the state.
The board of the Otsego Ski Club were some outstanding people. The president of one of the big banks in Detroit, the president of one of the Chrysler divisions here, and each one of them was a skier, so that the decisions made by that board were consistent with skiing.
The ski area was expanded after the war under the guidance of Otsego's ski professional, Al Allman. However, new members joined not only for the skiing, but also for the social atmosphere cultivated by McLouth.
Don McLouth was a very gentle man. He was very laid back, but a lot of fun personality, and he just he was just a super salesman. It was just great. When he looked at you, his eyes smiled all the time. They twinkled, and you couldn't help but smile with him when he smiled because it was so contagious. The whole group would come up here on weekends, and they just have a wonderful time just singing along songs and living up for the weekend and relaxing.
A banker in Detroit or a chemical company executive in Midland, Michigan could break away from their stratum and mix together in an atmosphere of relaxation, of frolic, and really taking the hat off of all the status symbols, of all the rankings and that sort of thing, and just really be kids again.
Sometimes we'd meet in Grosse Pointe or Bloomfield or wherever and carpool it up north and then check in at the club. And once that was done, we wouldn't unpack at all. We'd go right straight to the log mark, or if that hadn't been built, the main part of the club to the bar, so that we could see everyone and everyone knew that we were there for the next day.
The sport of skiing really took off in Michigan with the introduction of professional ski instructors. At Otsego, we had Lionel Hayes. And here is a guy who is probably the most beautiful skier, some would argue in the same league as Stein Eriksen, a fellow who had spent the war years at the 10th Mountain Division, certainly some very rigorous training. And Lionel had a great joy for life, had a great zest, and certainly had a way of taking people out of the lounge and out of the clubhouse and onto the slopes where they could enjoy the excitement and relieve themselves of the fear of skiing and really come into the joy. And one of the programs that Lionel had for the children was slalom skiing and how to race, and use that as a vehicle to teach them how to ski.
Well, now when it came time to go, and we all knew we had to go, What happened then was the most daring of our group got together and pretended we were kids again. And we followed the children's tracks through the woods, over little dips and mounds, hoping we wouldn't run into a stump, and we called it rat racing. And you had to try and keep up with the guy in front of you. Fortunately, no one was hurt, and we usually made it back to our cars and rooms and packed up and went home.
Less than 30 miles from Otsego, near Boyne Falls, a ski area opened in 1948 that in time would set a new standard for skiing in the Midwest. It was called Boyne Mountain and was the setting for more innovations and pioneering efforts than any ski area in the state. While rope tows were the accepted means of transporting skiers, Boyne Mountain installed the first chairlift in the state of Michigan. At a time when most ski areas in the country were teaching the Arlberg style of skiing, Boyne Ski School was teaching the new way, later called the reverse shoulder technique. Boyne was the first in Michigan to create a ski village with on-site accommodations, restaurants, and an outdoor swimming pool. Boyne became a pioneer in artificial snowmaking and developed patents that were used in snowmaking equipment worldwide. They aggressively promoted the sport of skiing to the people of the Midwest in ways that had never been thought possible, and brought tens of thousands of people into the sport through their Ski Week programs. The man who built Boyne Mountain was a 30-year-old car dealer from Detroit who had a love for skiing and a dream of creating a Sun Valley in the Midwest. Everett Frank Kircher was the only child of second-generation German immigrants, Edward and Thelma Kircher. He grew up in the ethnic neighborhoods of East Detroit and spent much of his youth working in his father's truck service garage. Kircher was enrolled in the University of Michigan when his mother was injured in an accident. He dropped out of school to help his mother and help run the family business. Kircher was soon a partner with his father